Welcome, welcome.
Welcome.
Howdy.
Did you want to continue talking about what we're talking about, or not on here, Tommy?
No. It's it's not public, so
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely chat later.
Okay.
It's concerning. All right. So today we're going to talk about creating comic books from start to finish.
Woo!
So we're going to get to start with Tommy today. As always, comic books start with a script.
Well, they start with an idea.
There you go. Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, they start with an idea, and sometimes that idea is your idea. Sometimes that idea is a collaboration with you and your partners, and sometimes that idea is given to you. And I've done a little bit of all of those. With Equinox Comics, Rachel Strand initially was given to us to work on, but I've done stories that weren't wholly ideas of mine that I present to an artist, and then there's I'm actually working on right now a complete collaboration piece where the artist came to me and pitched the idea, but left me a lot of room to play around in. So, and I don't have a particular preference. Sometimes I feel really passionate about an idea, would like to get it out there, and but one of my favorite parts of making comic books is the collaborative process. It's taking my input and the artist's input and making something better than it would otherwise be, with one person working it. So.
Right.
Oh yeah. Definitely, the collaborative process is, just amazing if you have the right people to collaborate. I mean, I would collaborate with Tommy. I can just honestly say with him, he has amazing ideas, and when he put them together, he also gives the artist a lot of freedom to, pitch ideas and to add more to the process. So.
Yeah, Johnnie and I, we've developed, and I say developed, but I feel like it was there almost from the beginning. A real creative chemistry. I mean, it clicked right off the bat. There was no feeling out process. I can't explain it, but there was no feeling out process. But. And we'll get to what Johnnie was talking about with the freedom as we go through the. So I guess we can kind of start. Like I said, that's where it all germinates. But then from there, it goes into the writer's hands. And at least for my part, I do a lot of outlining. I'll look at the comic, whether it's an issue or a bigger, if I'm doing a mini series or whatever I'm doing, and I'll lay it out just in paragraph format. What story am I trying to tell? To use More Than They Can Chew, our Bigfoot story as an example. The story was a group of kids, teenagers, young adults, whatever. It was kind of vague on that part. Get stranded in northeast Oklahoma between Bigfoot and a family of psycho hillbilly cannibals. And so I knew that was my story. That's what I'm doing with this. I mean, the elevator pitch for it was Bigfoot meets Wrong Turn, the horror series with psycho hillbilly cannibals attacking people who get lost in the middle of nowhere. So from that elevator pitch, we that kind of my story idea. And I will say, going into it, I didn't know how it would end. I didn't know if it was going to be a happy ending. I didn't know if it was going to be an everybody dies ending. I didn't actually even know Bigfoot's role when I started laying it out. I knew the psycho hillbilly cannibals were going to be hunting people, but I didn't know for sure, what Bigfoot's role was going to be. But from there, I go into an outline with a 3-act structure. It's pretty, your writing basics, your inciting incident, your turning points, that kind of thing, the resolution. And once I feel comfortable with that, then I start the page breakdowns, and that's where, if I know I'm writing an 8-page story or a 20-page story or whatever, I just try to, for my part, to do a loose outline of, page 1 we open with, use the Bigfoot story. We open with, the first 2 pages I think was just introducing the poor souls who were stuck in the middle of everything.
Right.
And then, or if I'm doing a Rachel Strand, it might be as basic as, 3 pages for a fight scene is all I write on the outline, just so I kind of block out what I'm doing, and that way I kind of know how to pace my scenes when I'm writing. But I don't hold slavishly to that once I get to scripting. And this is one of the things we talked about last week. One of the worst pieces of advice I ever got is there's one way to script, and there's not. Stan Lee used to reportedly used to do what they call the Stan Lee method, where he gave a rough plot to the artists, and the artist drew pages off that plot, and the Stan Lee filled in the script afterwards, based off the artist's panels. I do more of a traditional scripting. All the dialogue is in place before I ever send it to an artist. But to what Johnnie said a little bit ago about the freedom I give to artists, sometimes I have a very clear idea of a panel or a page layout or something, and I will overly detail that in my script. But I also really trust my artistic collaborators, and I'm open to that. If they come back to me with this doesn't work, a link to that, and Ben can toss it in the show notes afterwards. That's something you can do, right, Ben?
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. I had 3 panels: a close up of a character, the bad guys looking threatening, and the antagonizing force who was allied with the main character. It was 3 panels all reacting to one thing, and he gave me something back that turned into one of my favorite panels of all time, which is the bad guys and the other antagonizing force reflected in the glasses of the protagonist. Because he didn't see how to do the 3 panels I asked of him, but he got everything I wanted and more in one panel. And so, I was thrilled with that, and that's where the beauty of collaboration comes in.
That's where the magic happens.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens. I'll pause for a second because we got a question here.
Yeah, I've got a question from Justin for Tommy. As a writer, did you ever deal with any anxiety of writing someone else's ideas? How do you get over the nerves of playing with someone else's toys?
It depends. It depends on my familiarity when I go in. I had a collaboration with Kyle Chaney, who I think is largely retired from comics now, but he's a very successful tattoo artist in Oklahoma City.
Yes.
He wanted to work with me on one of his characters for Plan B Comics. And I was excited about it. Kyle and I always hit it off personally. But the script didn't work when I sent it to him. I didn't have a grasp of what he wanted, and so the collaboration never went anywhere. With Rachel Strand, we, the publisher of Equinox gives Johnnie and I a whole lot of leeway to tell our stories. We become stewards of it. And the actual creator of Rachel Strand, Tim Lackey, who's who's the publisher's best friend, Aaron's best friend, he's given us the full-throated stamp of approval to do what we want to do. So there's no nerves there. But I am real particular about making sure that, especially if it's a property with an established voice or established history, trying to make sure that I honor that, and that I'm not writing something that doesn't fit it. It's like in the case of the collaboration with Kyle, I fully understand him not using the story that I wrote for that reason. That it wasn't true to his character. That's fair. So I don't know if I really answered the question.
Well, I feel with Rachel Strand, I feel like we hijacked that character, and
Sure,
because it was more leaning toward the bad girl. Her original look leaned toward the bad girl era comics, which I despised. Right. And I told Tommy that, and even told Aaron that, and we wanted to do something, a little more, the lines of a traditional superhero, but
a little more restrained.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rachel is very much a superhero. I mean, like she's dressed like a superhero and everything, but she's a little more restrained in her dress than what we were originally given.
Yeah, she wasn't going to be a high-priced exotic dancer running around fighting crime and fighting other monsters and whatnot. So, kudos to them letting us have taking the reins and pretty much changing that character to I always said that's pretty much me and Tommy just took over the character and made it ours.
I felt like you guys attacked it with confidence when you guys worked on that book. Well, like you guys had like a clear idea of what you want to do with it before you even brought it to Tim, right?
And I can say they've both been real cheerleaders for us on working on the book. I mean,
yeah.
So
you guys didn't have that anxiety or those nerves, right? I mean,
no, not in that case. No, I mean, I can imagine, if say, Marvel somehow reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to write Captain America?" I would probably start drinking first, and I don't drink because that would be. There's a lot of responsibility there. There's a lot of history there. That character means different things to a lot of people,
right.
Whereas with Rachel, I had a blank slate. In a non-comic example, one of my favorite, I do a lot of tabletop role-playing games for people who don't know, not just as a gamer, but I've freelanced in it. And one of my favorite settings is Pinnacle Entertainment's Deadlands, which is a weird Western horror role-playing game. And I got to work on that a couple of years ago, an adventure for an anthology that they did, and that was big for me because that was one of my favorite sandboxes to play in. And there were a couple of things that I wanted to pitch that the sandbox's creator shot down. He didn't see it the way I did, but it was. I had a lot of nervous energy about doing that because that was a bucket list thing for me, getting to play in that sandbox that one time. So, Ben, you want to get us back on the rails here?
Yeah. So
I can divert a lot.
No, that's fine. We're talking about how comics start with ideas. So where do a lot of your ideas come from?
Well, I'm a hack, so I steal liberally from wherever I can.
Let's talk more about more than you can chew, because the idea behind it was Bigfoot versus monsters.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you
came to me with the idea of Bigfoot versus, or with monsters versus monsters was actually what
right,
you're
monster, right,
monsters versus monsters.
right.
And so I came up with Bigfoot versus Psycho Hillbilly Cannibals. Psycho Hillbilly Cannibals, which encompasses like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Wrong Turn, stuff like that. That's a genre of horror movies that I just get a kick out of for some reason. Like the bad guys in Wrong Turn, they're not really well developed characters, but they're visually interesting, and so it makes it more interesting than it otherwise would be, I think. And I tried to capture that a little bit with our Psycho Hillbilly Cannibal family. They all had kind of a gimmick to them that I handed to Johnnie to develop. But yeah, the original picture was Monsters versus Monsters, and like I said, I'm a big fan of Psycho Hillbilly Cannibals. I was never really a big Bigfoot guy, but it makes sense, you know. I mean, there's Bigfoot legends all over the world. Or Bigfoot style legends all over the world. You know, the reclusive, is he an ape? Is he what is he? You know, yeah. So that was pretty easy to run with. Once you gave me the premise of monsters versus monsters, so.
And okay, within that story, there's also a lot of Native American
mythology.
Wendigo, right, mythology. Was that Wendigo that you had in the story?
Sulkalul. I probably butchered the pronunciation. Sulkalul.
Yeah.
So basically, what that was once I started writing it, I knew I was writing Bigfoot, but then I started doing some research. Well, what's my hook on this Bigfoot? Because there's so many different versions of it. And I am a member of the Cherokee tribe. And so I thought I would dig a little bit, do a little research into Cherokee legends. And that's where there's a Cherokee legend of a great hunter that has kind of tied into the Bigfoot myth. And so I was able to adapt that a bit into, you know, that's what this Bigfoot's his purpose was. He was a hunter, and he was Sulkalul. And so then I actually went a step further with the Psycho Hillbilly Cannibals, and I was researching Cherokee myths on evil spirits, and I took one of those and actually transformed it into the matriarch of this hillbilly family. And that's what the ultimate showdown of the book is Sulkalul hunting the spirit of evil that is taken this form of this just grotesque and diseased hillbilly mom. And I'll also say, you know, making white rednecks the demonic presence of the story is as political as I've ever gotten in a comic book script. But I thought it worked, and that's something I've never explained publicly to anyone until this live stream. We've had this conversation in private, but I've never publicly went with that. So yeah, that was entirely me taking artistic license with something, but trying to find a unique hook to tell the story with.
And it came out great.
Bigfoot's randomly wandering around, and
right,
these people are randomly wandering around.
I thought you did a great job on that, man, because it was excellent.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and you know, as we talked about last week, that story is very special to me because, you know, Ben, you colored it. Johnnie and Jason Cootie split the art on it. Johnnie, my my understanding was you did most of the character designs. Was that right?
Yeah, I did all.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Jason, he threw that in my lap, so I went ahead and did them all.
Johnny gave us the best rush job ever on art. So.
Oh man.
Yeah, you did.
My apologies.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so when I went to scripting that, by the time I was scripting it, I had a pretty good idea at that point of what my Bigfoot was and what the family was. And I can get stuck sometimes on a script until I hit that missing piece, But I lay it out on the scripting process. Like I said, I do a full script, panel breakdowns, dialogue breakdowns. I give enough description for the artist to work off of because I don't believe in over writing to my artists, because ultimately if it's nothing they need for the reader to tell the story, or for them to convey the story to the reader, rather, I don't feel the need in giving it to it. So sometimes my panel descriptions are a sentence. Johnnie can attest to that. Sometimes it's 4 paragraphs, because especially if I'm working like with Johnnie, there's been times I've relied on his ability to convey emotion and body language and characters, and to elevate the story. And in those cases, I have to give him what he needs to know about what the characters are thinking, feeling, and doing. But my scripting to my artists is always very informal. I've only worked one time with an artist that I didn't know in some capacity before I wrote the script. So, you guys are all my friends, and, some level. So it's real informal. The notes to you guys in the script are real informal. And like I said, when I send it to the artist, I make it very clear that, if there's something that doesn't work, I'm still learning this process. Sometimes, you guys are aware, sometimes I write too much dialogue. Sometimes I ask for too much in a panel or on a page than what you can realistically do in a clean manner. So, the lines are always open. Call me, message me, email me, got an idea. I'm usually open to it. There are just some things that I hold on to very tightly because I have that clear image come through.
Talk a little bit about working with different artists. Do they want notes a certain way?
So far, no one has ever actually just said, "Hey, your format stinks. I can't do this."
What do you mean?
And I do kind of default to the way I script. I kind of default to the way I do my scripts for Johnnie, because that's who I work with most of the time, and so it's hard for me to have that habit. But yeah, I have a script for Chronicles right now that's in process with Mario Williams for the first standalone issue of The Curse. And Mario, he would send me questions occasionally, asking for clarification on stuff. Or he would send me thumbnails along the way just to say, "Hey, am I doing what you're wanting me to do? Is this looking good?" So I do a script to page comparison, and sometimes it was exactly what I was wanting. And sometimes it was better than what I was wanting. It goes back to that collaboration process. Kerry Stringfield, when I was working with him, I think the only thing that he asked me at all was that the combination panel with the 3 images and the two of them reflected in the glasses. Everything else, he just went straight through. I mean, he sent me a couple of character designs beforehand to make sure I was okay with that. I don't recall. I mean, you and I've done 2 stories together, Ben, where you were the artist, and I don't really recall you reaching out to me much as far as needing different information or more clarification. We did the Curse story in Equinox number 2, and we did the Inheritance in the Winter's Eye anthology.
Yeah.
Johnnie usually never comes back with T, what are you talking about here? So he figures it out, whether it's because I'm conveying it to him telepathically or he understands my method. So
Well, I think we talk enough that even we talk about it beforehand, you get the idea, and I think I gravitate toward it and try to convey it the best way I can.
Right.
And I think that's just part of our chemistry for working so many stories that we've done.
Sure.
Yeah. So Johnnie, what's your process once you get the script? What's the first thing you do?
First, I read them. Read them, go through them. Then send them accolades. Oh yeah, this is great. Yeah, this is gonna be crazy. This is gonna be crazy.
It's worth noting that after I send Johnnie a script, I wait nervously until I get feedback from him that he's actually read it, because I'm always afraid this is the point where he's going to tell me, Tommy, you're no good. I need to work with somebody else.
Oh, I don't think that was going to happen, brother, but because everything you sent me so far has been just out the park. But as soon as I get them and read them, usually my process goes into thumbnails. If I don't have to do, let me back that up. If I don't have to do character designs or anything, on any new characters or anything, I'll get those out. Then I'll definitely do thumbnails and kind of get a direction where I'm going with it. And then after it goes there, then I put it on the page, blue line. Then after that blue line, I go into regular pencils, tighten everything up. And then usually I'm the inker, so I'll go into inks. After that, it's no big difficult thing. It's just my straightforward process of getting it all done. And
now, I have a question, and I can't believe I've never actually asked you guys this all the years that we've known each other, been at conventions, and blue line. Please, explain, because that was weird to me when I realized that there was something you guys were doing before pencils. So what's the purpose of blue lines, and what are blue lines?
Blue lines is it's non-photo blue pencil, and what you can do is pretty much a layout process where you can lay out your story, and if something you want to change, let's say you have a figure drawing that you don't care for or don't like, instead of going through the process of erasing everything, you can just do it over with the blue line, and then it won't show up. So if you look at some of my pages, you'll see blue lines covered in that, and but you may see a whole different figure on top of it. So
right.
Blue line is pretty much a layout process. So if it's something that you don't like or you can change, then you can change it there. Or even if you just want to get your figure just the way you want, you can blue line without, you don't have to do any changes you would with a regular graphite pencil.
Okay.
Yeah, blue line, they used to use it a lot more back in the day because it wouldn't show up when they were trying to reproduce the image. So if there's any pencils lingering underneath the inks, they just wouldn't show up at all. So sometimes they're called non-repro blue, is the type of blue that it is.
Yeah. And I found that out in probably the late 80s, and I was just reading an article one artist was taught to use blue line, and I never thought until I actually found a blue line pencil, and when I started using it, I just fell in love with it. So I added that to my process of doing books.
Sweet.
But I mean, mine's not, again, kind of boring, not really anything glamorous, but blue line, regular pencils, inks. There you
What
go.
about design-wise, Johnny? Like when
As
you're
far as designs,
when you're laying out your panels, and do you look for those big moments in the script that you want to leave a big open panel for, that type of thing? Pacing your panels?
not really. And if you look at most of the panel work I've done, it's been pretty much straightforward. I haven't, unless it calls for it in the script, which Tommy usually excellent if he has a scene that he wants to convey. I'll try my best to convey it if he wants it a splash page rather, or maybe something that goes outside breaks the borders or whatever. My style is just pretty much straightforward. I rather just a simple pace for everybody to keep up. I love the stuff that the cool kids do with the breaking the panels and doing all that and doing different angles and whatnot. But to me, I've never feel like I could convey that good doing something like that. I'd rather just be, and again, that's much be the old school in me. I just rather just keep it straightforward and simple pace. And unless again a writer that I'm working with calls for it, then I do my best to try to do it. But other than that, I just try to be straightforward and simple. What about you, Ben? When you do that, I mean, is that something that you try to strive for, or do you?
Yeah, that's something I look for when I'm reading a script. I'll read the script and I'll see which panels are the most important, and I'll kind of decide, well, I'll give this one maybe like 40% of the page versus the other panels. I'll make them a little smaller. Try and convey those big moments that the writer's trying to get across to the reader. And
Right.
I kind of think of it that way, as like percentages.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where I wish sometimes I were even a rudimentary artist, so that I could. There's sometimes where I have such a clear idea that I wish I could sketch it out and send it, to the artist who's working on it. Because I couldn't even do anything passable, I think, in that regard. But
well, I mean, I think you ought to try it one time when you do it, Tommy, because that's what I usually tell people. Even if somebody that as much as you say you can't draw, there's a lot of people when they bring me commissions, let's say, and they want it this way. I mean, it may be a stick person, and I'm able to pull that out, and usually I have pretty good success with that. So just to put in here, you see in here on Seasoned Amateurs, guys, that Tommy's gonna give me a sketch.
I see some pages from Tommy.
Yeah. So
it's worth noting
right here, first time.
It's worth noting that in high school, I actually got an A for effort in art. My art teacher was so impressed with how hard I was working on the crap that I was turning in that I've never seen a teacher take pity on me before. But he would look at me with these pitiful eyes and just go, "Tommy, keep trying."
Ben, what's your process, man? I mean, is it similar to mine, or do you?
It's similar to yours. Like I'll read the script. Try not to sketch anything out the first pass I read it, and then I'll come back and read it a second time, and that's when I start doing my sketch work
Right.
to lay out the pages. Because again, the first time I'm reading the script, I'm looking for those big moments, whether it's emotional or action or just whatever the big moment is of the page to give it some focus.
Right.
And then I'll do my layouts, come back in and do tire pencils.
Yeah.
and then go to inks.
So, when you guys ink, you know, the only thing that most people and who don't do comics know about inking is the joke in the Kevin Smith movies that they're tracers.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and you guys both tend to do a lot of your own inking, right? I mean, I know Johnny does.
Right.
So, what do you do when you're inking?
When I'm inking, I'm looking to clarify the image because a lot of times with the pencils, you can be a little loose with it.
Mhm.
But with inks, you're kind of tightening things up, just making things a lot more readable to the reader when they see the image.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with. I mean, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. We're just tracing our, pencils, tightening up everything,
Mhm.
making the image pop a little more. And a lot of tricks to inking too. I mean, a lot of people think it's just tracing, but there's a lot more to it. You have to think of your line weights, because sometimes, if you don't have your line weights on point, then your drawing can look kind of
Flat.
off. Yeah, very flat. Don't look. So, I mean, having good line weights, your highlights, and then your shadows, of course. And like I said, line helps is pretty much the finishing up your page where you're going to present it on the book. I mean, there's some artists that got incredible pencils that probably can just do their pencils and that'd be good, but the inking is the process. It just makes everything come together.
I want to address each of you on this a little bit. Different things that I'd like to comment on about the process that I'm aware of. I'll start with Ben. When we did The Inheritance, it was an 8-page story for the Winter's Eye anthology. It was kind of Twilight Zone-y. It was about a con man who goes or who's running out of money, and he's got a rich relative who's dying. His grandfather, I believe, is dying, and he's trying to ingratiate himself in with his grandfather before he dies, so that he can get his cut of the will. And it's easily the least action-packed story that I've ever written. There was not a moment of violence in it. It was entirely, and I apologize for this now, Ben, it was entirely talking heads, motion.
But most Twilight episodes really are that.
Yeah, I enjoyed the story,
and that was the goal. Yeah.
But there's something, we had a conversation many years ago when Ben was working on this story. He sent me the pencils, and I remember turning to my wife and going, "That's a little rough," and it was because they were so loose. And then he sent me the inks sometime, a couple weeks later, whatever, and I went, "Wow, like that's a lot better." And then he sent me the grayscale, and I remember telling Ben, "Holy crap, this looks amazing!" And just the steps that you were adding along the way, just elevated it in such a wonderful, so wonderfully. That I don't know. I think that might be when I really appreciated, as a non-artist, what an inker does. Was working on that story with you.
That's really cool.
And Johnnie, our first Rachel Strand story we did was in full color, and we'll get to the coloring process in a minute. It was in full color, and that's the only Rachel Strand story we've done so far that was in full color. We did one story after that, a full-size comic, the Chronicles of Rachel Strand Voodoo story that was intended to be in full color, but we released it in black and white. And I think I speak for Johnnie when I say we're not happy with how that book looks visually,
Right.
because of the fact that it was never colored, but it was intended to be. And that was actually Jason Cootie. I think it was his first published comic work. And
Right.
his segment of it was specifically designed to be in color because it was a bizarre 70s Doctor Strange-ish weird
Yes.
dimension. And that was all lost in the final pages. From that moment on, everything we've done since then has been black and white. And Johnnie has altered his process because of it, to give it more weight. So if you'll talk a little bit about how that has altered your process a bit.
Well,
The shading.
the shading, and again, adding highlights, grabbing tones, and adding, as you said, weight to, not just the characters, but to even the backgrounds.
Yeah.
And, some of the, objects and things that they hold.
Hmm.
When you just leave it just straight black and white, then you get a lot of stuff that's missing, and it may not be what the writer's trying to convey. It may not convey it to a point as you would have if everything was fully colored, and you come a full render. But when we decided to do the 8-page Rachel stories, I just said, well, I'm gonna go ahead and use gray tones, and let me add a little weight besides, instead of just being just straight black and white. Let me see if I can add some weight. And I was actually surprised because I was going, okay, this looks better. So I just continued on, and then I think, Tommy, you came on and said, hey, this is where we need to go. This is everything just seemed like it came together more as it would, minus the colors, but just the gray tones and having that weight added to characters and backgrounds, and even just something simple as a tree. It made everything just come together and seem like you was in that moment. So I think since then we did the 8-page black and white Rachel stories. I mean, that became a deal. And
one of my favorite pages that you've ever done was from that first 8-pager, the Chronicles of Rachel Strand #0. And the story is one of the previous wielders of the Hellraisers, which are the magical blades that Rachel wears to fight evil. One of the previous wielders is narrating the story of his family's fight against darkness and how they found Rachel. And what we find out through the course of the story is that he's dead and a ghost, and narrating this. Because when the narration starts, it's him and Rachel standing in a cemetery. And then we find out that as the narration goes on, that he's dead, he's a ghost, and she's buried in a coffin. But Johnnie created this ethereal image. Rachel looks like she's it's in black and white, but she's got heavy blacks on her and everything, and looks like she has weight to her, like she has physical mass to her, and everything else is misty and cloudy and ethereal. And I get chills every time I see that page. Like, it just
oh man, thank you, brother. I try to convey what you wanted, so
and usually knock it out of the park. Now, really, the next step in comic creation in most cases is going to the colorist. And I know that is something that neither Johnny or I are particularly well suited to discuss, but Ben has quite the knack for.
Right.
Well, thank you.
So
Yeah,
Ben,
so
color your book.
yeah. Yep. So what I do is I get the pages and I start to flat them, which is a terrible and boring process. Most professional colorists will hire a flatter to do that for them, but I get to do it all myself, which is awesome and time consuming. But it's necessary because the flats are like the roadmap.
Right.
So if I color the face a certain way and we decide, well, we want to change the color of his skin, I can just go back and just select the parts of the skin that I need to change, and then I can just shift the colors on that. So it's definitely a necessary process. And then after that, I'm looking at, I'll look at the script and see, okay, is it daytime, nighttime, the inside of a building or the outside? What's the lighting like? And those types of situations, environments. Try to create depth. And just try and bring focus to whatever the important part of the panel is. And that's kind of the job of the colorist.
One of my, again, just bragging on you guys, one of my favorite bits that you've colored was More Than They Can Chew. At the very end, when you conveyed the flashing lights from the police cars and the ambulances across the panels of the survivors sitting there, because it mentally tricks me when I'm watching it as though we have the flashing lights. They weren't lost in the translation. That was just one of those cool little touches that I was so glad that we got to do that in full color, and I was glad that you did it because I think you did a great job.
Thank you. Yeah, if I remember that page correctly, I think what I did was each panel I kind of changed the color key from like red to blue and just kind of bounced it back and forth to kind of give that effect. So you're seeing things happen in that moment of time, but you're kind of seeing the colors change back and forth, right, red and blue.
Let me ask you, Ben, what was your influence on? Because again, there's a lot of moments, but when you colored the Sukalu's first appearance, when he first appeared, because she looked up at, and there he was right there, and
Bigfoot, you're real.
The way you colored him, it just like everything just popped, and that was always how I kind of imagined when he appeared, he had that kind of reddish tone to it, because I know we're in the middle in the woods and it's at nighttime, and the only light you have is pretty much from the stars and probably the moon.
Yeah.
What was your influence on that? Because I thought that was just amazing, because you had him where he could have been just a silhouette character, but you made him red, and I thought that was just amazing.
Yeah,
and it had
part of that's
mystery to it. Yeah,
part of that's just color theory, trying to make it pop, trying to pull the character forward, make him the more dominant image, I guess, in that panel. And so, red colors pull forward.
Yes.
Warm colors pull forward, cool colors push back. And so that was kind of my thinking there. It's like, even though it's a night scene, and he'd probably typically be like a bluish tint, just to add that red in there. So it almost looks purplish a little bit, but yeah, that's what I was going for.
It's almost purplish magenta.
Yeah.
That's what I always thought was, it always looked purple to me, and that makes sense with the, like you say, with the lighting would make it kind of bluish, but a natural reddish color, and that makes sense.
And I just thought that worked for that. And when I first seen it, I was just wow.
Yeah, no, I loved coloring that panel. That was just that first scene of him. That was really cool. That and also Jason's page, that creature.
Yeah,
So when she finally reveals herself,
and she transforms. Yeah.
yes, that reveal scene was like, oh, that's awesome. In my head, I could really see, I'm gonna make this pop. This is gonna be exciting.
And I want to give a little kudos and props to Jason for that,
Yeah,
because Jason, and I've even learned this from Jason, he looks at everything as if he's watching a movie and
yeah,
from the lens of a movie camera. And that's, what all comics should pretty much strive for. And when he does that, I mean, I think he pulls off, he's great at angles,
yeah. He is.
what he pulls off. And just that, again, that transformation scene, I mean, he just made it come to life. And you just sit there getting inside, go, ooh, oh, wow, this is like watching a movie or something. So, I just want to give him his props, and that he did a fantastic job of conveying a lot of them scenes and whatnot. So Jason, if you're watching, props, man.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Yep.
And it's worth noting that we can you can actually go to Indie Planet and get that issue. If you just want to see what we're talking about, it's the digital version, I believe, is still free, right, Ben?
Yeah, it's still free.
Yeah, the digital version is free. You can download the digital version for free and see exactly what we're talking about with this story. And if you want to buy a print copy while you're at it, well, we wouldn't mind.
Right.
Not at all.
Now, part of the reason I wanted to leave them free is because we created these comics to be seen, and I don't want money to be the reason why you don't check them out. Just if you love comics, you should have access to it. Just let us know what you think.
Yeah, my I have friends and family all the time. They want to support me, but they want a comic that I'll autograph and they can put in a bag and stick up on a shelf. And cool. I like it when someone reads it, and I write this stuff because I have this hope that someday someone's going to read it. Not want to be famous for it, but that someone's going to enjoy it. That I'm going to reach somebody with it. So
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, of course, especially with the art and the story. You want somebody to enjoy it and get some kind of enjoyment out of it. And say, hey, I'm going back, go back and read it again. Hey, then come, maybe see us somewhere and say, hey, what was your feeling on that? Because that scene did something to me or made me feel a certain way.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Don't just be investing in it in hopes that you're going to make some money when we're dead. So.
Not going to make much. Sorry.
Right. That's what I tell everybody. Well, you never know. But read it and tell me what you thought about it. Even if you tell me, I wasn't a big fan of what you did here. That's something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, we're not that popular or vain that we don't tell, oh, well, get away from me. That's one of my best work. Get away from me. Yeah, no, we want to hear criticism too. So, if I gave somebody 6 fingers, let me know.
Right.
So we're on to lettering now.
Lettering. I'll let you kick that one off, Tommy.
All right.
Rock on, T.
So lettering. Here's the thing. Most of the time, especially with these little collaborative projects that we're doing, we don't work with an editor. We're keeping each other honest on this stuff. And I tend to be the one who letters the stuff that I write. I think I've had 2 stories done, two comics released that I didn't letter. And so the first thing I say with this is my lettering process is my editing process for the script. Usually when I finish a script and I send it to the artist, unless they have a question that I need to address, I don't read the script again until I letter it. And I take that time between the time I finished it to the time I'm starting lettering to give myself fresh eyes to, sometimes there's dialogue that I think worked at the time that just doesn't work now, that kind of thing. I've gotten out of it, but I've had a tendency to make a couple pop culture references that wind up getting very dated very fast at the pace that the books are being produced. So yeah, my lettering, that's one of the reasons I actually, even though I don't like the process of lettering, that's one reason I like taking on the responsibility of lettering. And it's because it allows me to re-examine the script. And if the dialogue needs to be reworked, I want to be the one who's reworking it. I don't want a letterer trying to make it work, or, oh, we could probably cut this sentence out, or, no, let me figure out how I need to do it. The process of lettering itself, here's the thing. A bad lettering job can destroy a good script, and a bad lettering job can destroy a good page. I mean, you can't rush lettering. You can't not care when you're lettering. You will destroy something. You will, your letterer, whether it's you or it's somebody else, is guiding the reader's eyes across the page. That's from the panels layout, that's up and down. If they're not paying attention or caring about what they're doing, people are reading panels out of sequence or reading word balloons out of sequence, covering up people's heads or pieces of the art that don't need to be covered up. And so it's a job that requires attention to detail. You don't want to mangle the script. You also don't want to mangle the art. And with Western comics, you're reading up, down, left, right. I mean, that's where people generally go, up, down, left, right. They want to they start at the top to go down, left to right. With manga, you go right to left. And I've seen comics. I've seen major comics, like Marvel, DC stuff, where letters, it's not the whole book, but there'll be like pages, panels that the word balloons are out of sequence and it throws you off. I've seen indie comics that were unreadable because the letterer had no idea, and usually it was the writer who was lettering, had no idea of what they were doing. I've bought a couple books on lettering. The Blambot website has tips and tricks. The Comic Craft website has tips and tricks. You have to be careful with your fonts. You have to make sure your fonts are big enough that they're readable and clear enough that they're readable, but that they're, again, you're not overwhelming the page. I actually have a big fondness, and it's when I'm big fondness for lowercase fonts. A lot of comic books, especially superhero comics, tend to be, all caps font.
Caps, yeah.
And I have a couple of fonts that are in my Rachel Strand toolbox. Rachel specifically has a font that I use with all of her dialogue. But then most of the rest of the characters, they have a lowercase font that it captures that kind of informal voice that I try to give the characters. And it also, I think, kind of fits, Johnnie and I, Johnnie does all of his art hand drawn. It gets scanned in, and then I letter. All of our Rachel Strand books have kind of a garage feel to them. Like two guys just knocking it out. And some of the font choices that I make feed into that, and that's intentional. That's a vibe that I like with it. I like how it feels. At this point, I wouldn't want Rachel Strand to look too slick. I want it to have that, you know, up to our elbows in it, approach to it. But yeah, I mean, that's the big thing with lettering is, you have to have good font selection, but it has to be top down, left, right, because sometimes letters get stuck with a writer who doesn't understand that, and the writer gives them stuff that's hard to lay out on a page. Lettering has made me a better writer. Writing makes me a better letterer. And I say that I've only had one lettering job that I've ever done that I thought looked good, and that was More Than They Can Chew. And part of that was the tools I worked with. I bought Clip Studio. I use it only for lettering. But it was the first time that I was able to focus on just making it look good and not on how in the hell to make it work. Because I don't do graphic design programs. I've tried Photoshop. I've tried Illustrator, GIMP, Inkscape. I could never make them do what I wanted them to do. And Clip Studio's designed to kind of ease that path a little bit. And in return, I got to focus on how everything looked, making the dialogue pop in the best way that I could. And it made for the best lettering job I've ever done. Sorry, I ramble.
No,
it's all good.
I wanted to add on that, especially just to artists, and this was kind of lesson learned when we did the first Rachel Strand story. Also, when you're drawing and you're drawing panels, you have to be leery and conscious of where your word balloons and what your narration is going to go. And I think that was part of the lesson. Again, it was more lesson learned. It wasn't real bad, but it was lesson learned on us because a lot of the scenes I didn't draw. I had like narrow panels where Tommy couldn't get a lot of the dialogue where it wouldn't fit. Well, Tommy didn't do the writing on that, but the dialogue wouldn't fit.
It was actually Kent Clark that lettered that one.
Yeah, he did.
But I took a lot of
my fault. Yeah, but it was my responsibility. I should have been cognizant of the word balloons and whatnot in the dialogue, and that's something. Again, lesson learned. Because when we looked at it, we was going, "Oh wow, that just covered up all the word balloons. Just covered up that whole scene." So, all your artists out there, be cognizant of your scenes that you're drawing, and that you have enough room that you have your narration, word balloons, even your sound effect fonts.
Right.
If there's a scene that needs a specific sound effect, I mean, that's part of the art of comics too, because that sound effect could be key to the scene and to the whole story too. So just be cognizant of that. And again, it was lesson learned because I was drawing narrow scenes and then you say, oh wow, you only see like part of the character than a bunch of word balloons going. So to be cognizant of that, and when you're rendering your scene, and make sure that your letterer has enough room to put the appropriate lettering, word balloons, narration, sound effects, and to make everything work.
Well, yeah. As a writer, I take, especially on that script, I take a ton of responsibility for that because that was the second script I'd ever written, and I wrote that thing like I was never going to get to write another comic book again. I have learned as a writer, in places where I need to step back and let the story breathe, and let the art breathe, which makes your job easier and makes the letterer's job easier, whether it's me or somebody else. But that's why collaboration, but that's why it's a collaborative process.
Of course.
We're all most of the time we're actually working on our own, but nothing we do is in a vacuum because it impacts the person's job before you and after you.
Right.
Right.
You got
That's
anything to add on that, Ben? I'm sorry. I mean,
no, yeah, I was gonna say that's a good point, Johnny. Yeah, that's one of those rookie mistakes a lot of young artists make is when they're drawing a panel, they're not thinking about the headroom they need to leave for the
right.
letterer. They're just thinking about drawing the pretty picture.
Of course.
Right.
And
So yeah, that's
even
definitely something.
even when I worked with Omega 7 out of Kansas City, a lot of the, he'd had me do the word balloons where they might go.
Oh, okay.
To me, that was, that's something I should have known. And, I was always, cognizant of it. But, when I came into Equinox, and Tommy had this beautiful script and scene, I'm going, oh, wow, I'm going to draw this. And then, uh-oh. So again, just, be cognizant of, where your words, balloons, and narration and, sound effects are going to go.
I want to give a big shout out to Jason Cootie because those pages he did for the Voodoo story, which were, as far as I know, his first published comic book pages.
Yes.
He showed me before I ever saw the finished art, he showed me in his sketchbook how he went out of his way to outline it both for his angles that you guys were talking about earlier.
Of course.
And he was drawing in the word balloons, to kind of get his feel for where they were at. So that was one thing. That was one thing he had picked up on immediately. So
yeah, and that's one thing I learned from him. I mean, he always give me credit that I showed him how to do this and that, but I've learned from a lot of people, even people that's less experienced than me. When he said, I do camera angles, and that just, wow, you are 100% right. And just looking at, seen some of his sketches in his sketchbooks as well, and just the angles he goes after. And well, if I'm watching a movie, I'd like to see it from this angle, and a lot of it just makes 100%. I mean, just 100% sense. And again, just hats off to him. And giving his props that he's due. And again, especially with the More Than You Could Chew story, I thought that amazing job.
Yeah.
And then really once you're past lettering, really all you're doing at that point is whatever your printing process is. Which is compiling your file names and sending them to your printer, and that varies with your printer specifications. Some might require a PDF. Some, they'll make the PDF based off your file names, but they'll give you specific naming conventions for your files because that way they don't print your book out of order. I've only worked with 2 printers in that regard, which is Kablam, and then with the name's escaping me now.
Was it Digiprint?
Digiprint, yes.
Digiprint.
Yeah. Both of them have been pretty user friendly. For my part, I've been stuck with that end of it more than I'd like. That's the only thing that kills me with making comics, is I absolutely love it when someone who knows how to make sure the pages are the right dimensions before I get them for lettering is the one scanning them in, because that stresses me out more than anything else, is that print setup and make sure everything's the right size. I stress it out more than writing, more than lettering. And Kablam has a template that you can use, but I still second guess myself with it, because I'm not as comfortable with those kinds of programs, Photoshop and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. Just be fair, I'm not either, Tommy. And one thing I want to definitely learn them, but just I guess, like I said, I get too old school. I say, well, I can draw that fast. I can put it on YouTube. So, so again, eventually gonna learn. I might be 60 by the time I learn it, but I'm eventually gonna learn it.
You'll get there, Johnny.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if my handwriting wasn't absolutely terrible, I would probably be doing old school lettering. I would be hand lettering.
Yeah.
But my handwriting's so trash that we wouldn't get anywhere with it.
Could let's do magazine cutouts and look like a serial killer. Who ordered this book? Crazy person.
Well, that's always true when I'm doing it. So. What are some of you guys' favorite tools to work with when you're drawing, when you're working on comics?
Man, I'll let you go. I've been gambling more than you have. So why don't you go first this time?
Lately, I've been using Clip Studio a lot more. For this last issue of Tricks and Treats, I use just strictly Clip Studio. It's all digital. It was my first time doing it. It goes a lot quicker than doing it traditional. But honestly, I miss inking, by hand. I just like the feel of the brush. But yeah, Clip Studio is probably the program I use the most, and then of course coloring in Photoshop. Then inking with crow quill pen, nib pens, brushes, all on bristboard. What about you, Johnny?
I use what I can find. Okay, y'all know I buy tons of art. Really, I don't. Like to use F-lead pencils.
Mm-hmm.
I know, because they're just simple. It's a harder lead, and it's just simple. Then you don't have to as nearly as much as the smudges.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'll use anything. I'll draw with a regular big pen if that's all I could grab. But I test out a bunch of stuff. I like to try different things. Been seen, and y'all seen the bag I carry around at conventions. I have everything from Copic markers to Winsor Newton to these little cheap ones, Master's Touch, I guess. I'm looking at it right now. I use Crayola markers. I use a little bit of everything. I use a regular number 2 pencil.
Even on comic pages, or
yeah, sometimes I have, and just because if I start working, I'll just stay with it. But usually with comic pages, I usually use an F-lead. But like I said, I'll use a little bit of everything, man. Ben got me back into using regular inks, doing the India ink, and because I was just loving the way when he comes to shows and he'll pull out the brush and stuff. So he got me back into that. I used to use the nibs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But Ben got me back into that. I mean, using the pens is easy. It's just easy and convenient. But something about that India ink is the richness of it.
Yeah.
When you're going over one of your pieces, and just that ink is just so rich, it makes everything pop a little better than a regular pen would. Yeah, man, I use I use a little bit of everything. I would scan around, but I don't want to mess up the podcast. But scan around and we just see all this. I got stuff everywhere. So I mean, you'll see. I mean, I have the 4B pencils. I got getting the F leads. I got the H's. I use a little bit of everything. So it's just a passion for art, and you just want to just touch. Oh, I want to try this. I want to try this. I want to try this. Yeah. I mean, just the love for art, and just trying different things.
Yeah, I got this pencil lid holder. This one time, Johnny, Jason, and I went to Hobby Lobby, and it's got a really thick lid on it, and I really like that just for my groundwork, basic sketch before I go into detail. And then I've got this pocket brush pen right here. That is one of my favorite tools.
Oh, wow.
It's refillable, so I just fill that little cartridge up.
Yeah.
And instead of buying the extra cartridges, because that gets expensive, I use this ink, and I just use the dropper to fill up the cartridges.
Seems like a lot of work, man.
Yeah. I don't mind. I like maintaining my brush.
There you go.
So it's a favorite tool of mine, so I like taking care of it.
Awesome, man. Well, I guess nobody's came on. I haven't seen any more questions.
Nope. We had a spammer in here I had to remove.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Does that mean we made it? We're getting spammed?
Yeah, I guess so. So let's talk about some of the rookie mistakes that people make in the writing process, and then we'll go to the art process. But some pitfalls to avoid.
Well, yeah, I mean, the biggest one that I just owned up to a little bit ago was overwriting, and by that I mean too much dialogue for the page. There is, and it's more art than science. I mean, because you go back to dig up Silver Age Marvel comics, and hell, Stan Lee would write so much dialogue that he'd have Spider-Man jumping through the air and every word balloons all around him. But yeah, knowing kind of when to breathe, and if you're not outlining, one problem you can run into is not setting things up correctly. I actually just finished the first draft of the script last night, and in my outline, I had a character's boyfriend who was supposed to get in the way of something she was trying to hide. And I didn't think about it in the outline, but I'm 15, 16 pages into the script when the boyfriend's supposed to show up. And I realized that I hadn't introduced the boyfriend, but I had made a fairly big deal out of her two, like her two best friends. So I dropped the boyfriend on the fly and replaced the boyfriend in the scene with two best friends, because that makes more sense than what I had outlined. But yeah, the absolute biggest thing with writing, because this goes with any story, whether it's a self-contained 8-page story or an ongoing series or whatever, is don't ask your artist to do so much that you crowd them out. And the other thing is action in a comic script. The writer has to remember every panel's a snapshot. So there are ways that you can convey motion in art. I mean, you guys are fully aware of that. Motion lines, after images, but the fact is, you can't be asking your artist to be conveying a character in like doing something. Like, it's has to be a snapshot. What are they doing in that panel? Johnny's a great artist. He can't convey me rearing back and swinging forward in one panel, you know. And so those are the two, like, just, I think, biggest things that writers need to remember is don't overwrite your dialogue, scale it, or narration, captions, whatever. Scale it back so that the artist has room to draw and the letter has room to letter without crowding each other out, and be cognizant of the action that you're asking the artist to convey.
That's good.
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah. From there, the only other thing I can think of is obviously when you're writing something longer term, like whether it's a continuing an ongoing series, you know, kind of be aware of, you want to make sure, or if you're writing a character that somebody else has already created, is don't be lazy about their voice. Characters have voices, okay? You know if when you pick up a comic, if Wolverine's acting out of character, or Captain America's acting out of character, or Spider-Man's acting out of character, because these characters have history. And being aware of that when you're writing, and it doesn't matter if it's Captain America or if it's an indie comic that only 10 people have read. Keep your voices consistent, unless there's a reason. If the reason is that somebody's possessed by something, then the fact that they sound out of character should be a clue. But if you're just a sloppy ass writer who doesn't pay attention to that sort of thing, then your foreshadowing gets lost.
Very good. Very good. I like that.
All right, Johnny, what about for artists?
I think you touched upon it before, Ben. Balance in a scene.
Yes.
You definitely want to give room for your narration and whatnot. But also with that, you don't want to overcrowd a scene. I mean, I know a lot of people talk about doing backgrounds, but sometimes you don't need a background. If you have a person just talking, you can have a close-up on their face and just express that emotion. You don't have to you can see the bus flying by. You don't have to see the buildings in the background. You don't have to see a plane on that. I mean, as long as the close-up and focus is on that character or whatnot. Also, just on a funny standpoint, as far as when you're drawing women, you don't have to put their full bust on the page. You can limit it to just a headshot and whatnot. And I know a lot of people like to do that just so they can just draw a woman's chest. I mean, that's not really necessary. Again, just balance, really. Just where your scenes are balanced and you're not overcrowding, and at the same time you're not have something underdeveloped too. So that's what I suggest. What about you, sir? That you're on both sides of the fence.
Yeah. No, I think you guys touched on everything. I'll speak more towards coloring. A lot of the rookie mistakes I see as far as coloring goes is over rendering backgrounds, and they compete for attention with the foreground, with the main character. And I've heard this said before. I don't remember who said it, but like when you're looking at something, your eye focuses on the one thing that you're looking at, and everything around it, even though all that information is there, is out of focus. And that's the way it should look when you're coloring a comic or even drawing the comic book. You don't have to over render your backgrounds like you said, Johnny. But yeah, as far as coloring goes, all your rendering should be on the focus of the panel, and you can keep it. You have to keep it as detailed for the background and surrounding elements.
Of course. Just a quick question, Ben. Do you think sometimes some colors kind of oversaturate some panels with color?
Yeah, but it could be a stylistic choice, or it also depends on the genre. Like sci-fi comics could probably benefit from oversaturation, or superhero comics. But it also depends on the tone of the book, what you're going for. Because I've seen it the other way too. I've seen some colors just like lay down flats, and it looks boring. But so it could go either way.
Okay. I've always said, because there's some books I've seen where well, that's kind of oversaturating with, and it really didn't need it for that particular scene or that particular few pages. Then
Right.
right for something like a sci-fi book, or just where it's the scene calls for it, where the scene makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, but I think some of them, they get in there just because they can color it. They kind of put too much into it, and it just comes all of this kind of comic book rave, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I've definitely seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that really only works in very specific instances,
Right.
like the trippy '70s Doctor Strange style.
Of course.
But if you're telling like a somber character piece, and the colorist is trying to squeeze in every color of the rainbow, yeah. As artists, and this is one thing I see some people struggle with. So have you guys kind of speak on this a little bit? There's a difference between a great pinup artist and a great sequential artist, and people who don't really understand the art of comic books don't get that. So could you guys talk about that a little bit? The differences between, someone just drawing a pinup, but like you guys might do for even for a cover or for a commission at a convention, versus sequential storytelling.
Yeah, I think with the sequentials, what you're doing is you're telling a story, and that's
Um,
the main difference. You have to have that ability to tell that story
of
through
course.
sequential panels. Whereas when you're drawing a cover or a pinup, um, that you're just it's all about how pretty it's going to look. You're trying to sell the book. You're trying to sell the character. You're trying to sell the image. But what do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, I agree with you right there. I mean, yeah, you get a pinup, you're gonna have, somebody does. Of course, you want to do the bodybuilding anatomy. You have, especially if it's superheroes, so it's going to be, humongous, powerful image with the guy or girl, and and you just have the cape and whatever have you. But when you go into, you have to tell a story, and sometimes it doesn't call for, muscles and um, a girl's boobs. Uh, you have to be able to tone it down. And can you make a heavy set lady? Can you make a skinny lady? Can you make a skinny guy? Can you make a heavy set guy? Can you make a
characters
child?
characters
Yeah,
that are less likely to line up on a cover,
right.
because
Can you
yeah.
can you put that in there? Can you draw a bird? Can you draw a dog? Can you draw a horse? Can you draw a tree? Can you draw a rock? Can you draw a car? Can the car looks like it could actually function? I mean, even if you go on the sci-fi route, can you draw a spaceship? Can you draw a unique spaceship that doesn't look like a Millennium Falcon or doesn't look like a phallic symbol? Um, I mean, you have to be able to tell a story, and you have to be able to draw outside, the constraints of the cookie cutter anatomy that a lot of people fall into. As drawn, we have to have the big, humongous chest guy, with his arms out, his knees bent, flying or jumping or whatever, or the lady with, a 40D chest and, a 22 waist and a 34 hips, but she got big muscles, she got big guns too, and got long 80s hair. Um, So I mean, I think that's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just telling story. And sometimes you may need those to tell a story. Can you put those in a format to where they're telling a story where they're not doing an action pose? Can they be sit down, composed, a cup of tea, or
Right.
can they be brushing their teeth, or could they just be reading a book? Can you convey image? Not image, but emotion. Is this
Mm-hmm.
person sad? Can you make them angry? Can you make them confused? So you got all those instances that you have to consider. Whereas when you're telling a sequential and good, storytelling. Um, Whereas in a pinup, all you have to do is just make them look cool.
Right. It's all about the eye candy.
Yeah. That answer any?
Yeah, I've seen artists over the years struggle with that, obviously, because they can draw really pretty dynamic images of guys, of heroes, villains looking menacing or powerful, but when you're having to draw Wolverine sulking at a bar instead of looking menacing with his claws out and standing on a stack of bodies, it becomes something different.
Yes.
So that was something I thought was worth touching on for people who maybe get a lot of praise for their artistic ability and think, well, I can do comics. There's some of that skill set is a little bit different. Some of my favorite comic book artists aren't necessarily people you would think of as flashy artists, like the flashy superstar artists, but their storytelling is amazing. Eduardo Risso, who was the artist for 100 Bullets. I loved his storytelling in that, but I've never seen him on as many posters as your average Image guy, of the classic Image.
Right.
Brian Hurt, who worked with Colin Bunn on The Sixth Gun, he's another one that hell of a nice guy too. We sat next to him at Planet Comic Con.
Mm-hmm.
But he's another one that his art in The Sixth Gun, just panel to panel, just sucks me in. Yeah. I mean, he knows what he's doing, moving you along in that story, so.
I think that's where it gets kind of lost that, Tommy, that, the guys that tell stories, they can sink readers, getting readers sunk in. Because just thinking about, just books in the past, the best ones they wasn't really the flashy artists. They were the ones that could tell a story and get you sunk in to the story, where you just become a part of it. You can't wait to happen what happens in the next issue. So, I think you're 100% right and accurate on that.
Yeah, who drew Watchmen?
I stepped up my lane a little bit. I'm sorry, what?
Who drew Watchmen? I know his last name was Gibbons, right? I can't remember his first name.
Yeah, Dave Gibbons, I think.
Yeah, him. Like his storytelling is some of the best I've seen ever, and his layouts are really plain, really simple, but his storytelling, his emotion, the way he emotes the characters,
right?
Like that's just such great storytelling,
right?
Yep. And he's not a flashy artist.
No,
keeps it simple.
Oh, definitely.
Well, simple but complex. Even in the art, there was a lot of complexity there, but it wasn't flashy. It wasn't,
right.
It wasn't pinup stuff. It was like next level stuff.
Yeah, you could tell a lot of thought went into his layouts and how he laid out those pages.
To me, Paul Smith on the X-Men run, especially the Brood story. To me, he wasn't really a flashy artist. I mean,
Sure.
his lives were pretty simple, and he didn't have cross hatching and all these over lines that made everything dynamic and made it you can have the energy going. I mean, he was pretty much simple, and he kept his lines simple, and a lot of his covers they were pretty much okay, but his storytelling it sucked you in. And I thought the X-Men Brood run, I thought that was probably one of my favorite X-Men stories.
Yeah,
So-
Mike Mignola kind of goes into that role too, where he's not a flashy artist,
Of course.
but his storytelling is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
David Aja on his Hawkeye run,
Yeah.
with Matt Fraction, like those are some of my favorite books that Marvel ever put out, and his storytelling, his lots of design elements that go into each page. Again, just really well thought out process.
Right.
But not stuff that you would classically see slapped up on posters and
Right.
No, I agree. So, what did you call it, Jerry Bennett with the crosshatching there, Johnny?
Huh? What'd you say?
So what did you call it, Jerry Bennett with the crosshatching?
Jerry who?
I bet
Jerry who? Who's Jerry? We love you, Jerry Bennett.
We love you, Jerry.
we do. That's the whole reason I said that, was just an excuse to name drop Jerry Bennett, because I love the guy.
Oh man.
So, we've talked about the rookie mistakes, and I mean, is there anything maybe we haven't covered that you guys have learned from experience working, from comic to comic? It's like I said, for my part, the biggest thing I've learned is, to know when to dial it back. Sometimes I don't need to tell everything in the dialogue. Sometimes there's another story that I can tell, to let that all breathe. So, is there something maybe we haven't covered that you guys have learned over the time that you've been doing this?
No. That even in doing this, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I know that you said that you had to learn that, you had to make a little more space for. But is there anything else storytelling wise maybe you picked up?
I'm always learning. So I mean, there's stuff that I can do, but stuff that I can do better. Mm-hmm. And I've never, again, I don't think I'm that artist or think I'm that guy that, I learned everything because, I'm the oldest guy sitting, sitting at the table. But no, I'm always learning, and I always think I can get better with all aspects of all of my art, and and that's why I always look at it, because I'm a nobody. And I still have room to grow and room to get better. And and even if I've done a few comics, I've been doing comics since '92, so that's 20 some odd years doing this stuff. And I'm still learning. I know I get a lot of commission work and a lot of this, but I still can get better. And I'm definitely not. I'm definitely not the best at this craft. I'm still, again, trying to move forward, trying to learn. I mean, I was drawing last night actually, and see it and I throw it away, going, "Well, crud, I stink." So start back over. So, but no, I guess just still remain humble, and everybody's got room to grow. Everybody got room to learn. And No, and even if you do, you get a little accolade here and there. It's not. It don't mean anything. You still can learn. You still can get better. So,
Ben, is there anything that looking back to the work that you've done that you picked up that we haven't talked about yet that you've tried to learn from, tried to correct or grow on or improve on?
Yeah, probably the one thing that kind of sticks out to me from my first issue I ever drew to the way I'm drawing now is scale. Like the scale of the panel, the scale of the scene. Trying to make it look more cinematic versus always up close, always just kind of two-dimensional, just flat, just looking straight on to the character, but get it from different angles, showing the environment that the character's in a little more, just making it look a little more grounded, a little more real, I guess. Then also, I guess the importance of reference when you're drawing and trying to find that balance of stealing backgrounds versus taking inspiration from backgrounds, from reference images.
Just since you brought up reference, do you use a lot of reference, Ben?
I do, like right now for Westward Darkly, even though I'm not drawing it yet. Like I was pulling lots of references of landscapes because I want to practice drawing it in black and white and ink.
Of course.
So just again, I want to learn from it and use that knowledge basically down the line when I'm drawing the book.
Of course.
But yeah, I feel like it's important to have a reference to make it look a little more grounded, a little more. Yeah. I don't want to say realistic, but just a little more real.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that can subconsciously draw a reader in. Is if you're drawing something off the cuff, and maybe there's details like just background detail or stuff like that don't fit because you didn't use a reference. I think it maybe doesn't necessarily hurt the story, but maybe it kind of prevents someone from connecting. Whereas, if you are, like you say, using references that have that sense to them, familiarity for people,
right? Make them feel comfortable in the story, and they can
kind of sucks them into
right. Yeah, because something that doesn't look right can be jarring.
Right.
Sure.
Of course. Well,
I a lot of times, and I know Ben's aware of this because of at least one script we worked on. A lot of times I'll try to visualize the characters in my head, and I'll try to relate them sometimes to actors, and because the inspiration in my head for the main character of The Inheritance that we were talking about earlier was Josh Holloway from Lost, and specifically the Sawyer, his character there, because he was a con man, and he was that kind of easy talking piece of crap con man. Except our version of him didn't have any of the depth of the character in Lost, but he wasn't meant to. He was meant to be, because the whole story is about a con man getting his just desserts, not telling his story of redemption. So.
I think it definitely helps you find a voice for the character if you have someone in mind.
More than they can chew. The 5 characters who were stuck between the Cyclo Hillbilly Cannibals and Bigfoot, they were all people that worked in my warehouse with me at my day job. They provided the loose inspiration for it, and that's why one of them wound up having the one who kind of explained the Cherokee hooks to the mythology was was based off of one of the guys that I work with, and that's why that kind of came to the forefront a little bit. Was conversations I've had with him, and
Oh wow.
you know, it kind of helped inform that character's voice a little bit. So,
Well, I know you always said Nancy Nettles in the Rachel book, and I I don't know how I did it, but I know you said that I guess nailed this character.
heavily inspired by a former boss of mine. Heavily inspired. Everyone that I know who knew her, that has read anything she's in or saw anything she's in, went, whoa, you know. And Johnny's never met the woman, never seen the woman, but she inspired me because she's incredibly soft-hearted, but she had an opposing form, and doesn't have an inside voice, but like the sweetest lady, and that's the core of the Captain Nettles character in Chronicles of Rachel Strand. She's a good person, but she can make you crap your pants without trying.
Right.
She's probably more intimidating than Rachel is, and Rachel's a half vampire with blades.
Right.
You know. But I do stuff like that, and a lot of writers do. I do stuff like that a lot when I'm writing, and I'll take nuggets of people, you know, and build around that. The character Harlow in Chronicles of Rachel Strand has got a little bit of me in it, because he's kind of an asshole, and I can be too. You know, so, but I find that taking that nugget of people and putting them into those characters can make characters feel more real to people, because people in real life aren't one-dimensional. You know, they're three-dimensional. They have thoughts. You know, sometimes people completely contradict themselves,
Right.
and you know, in ways that don't make any sense. You know, but you can convey that in characters and writing, and it can make the characters feel more real rather than just. If you do it wrong, it comes across like you don't know what the hell you're doing. But if you do it right, it can make the character's voice feel more real to people.
Have you ever had a character? No, you're fine. Have you ever had a character that you couldn't find their voice? You weren't sure how to proceed with them or which direction to go with them?
Yeah. And what usually happens is the script completely stalls out until that inspiration strikes. I had that with the script I just finished last night. It's a project, and I don't want to get too deep into the what it is until we're ready to move forward with it. But it's a project that was pitched to me by Michael Kennedy, who one of our friends in the Oklahoma comic creator community, and I was kind of dragging along bits and pieces with it because the character hadn't crystallized to me. And then it hit, and I wrote 10 pages last night. You know,
wow.
That floodgate opens up, and everything you realize, oh, that's the hook. That's who this person is. There's the voice. I think I might have mentioned on last week's show, we did an 8-pager that we haven't published yet.
Yeah.
I was stuck on the outline. I couldn't even do the page breakdowns. And so I was like, I try to not force the writing process, but I was like, I'm going to force the writing process. I wound up creating a whole new character that I'd never discussed with Johnnie. Because when I send him, I bust out the 8 pages, I send it to Johnnie, and he goes, "Who's this?" And I said, apparently he was there all along, waiting for me to find him. So, you know, But that's the beauty of writing is when it's flowing that way and it surprises you, not when you're dictating it to the page.
Right. That's good stuff, man.
Excellent stuff.
Writing's the thing I enjoy more than anything in the world. And like I said, when it flows, man, it floodgates open up, and it's good
Here it
stuff.
comes, huh?
Yeah. I have a Pandora station that I've well curated that I'll have one in the background when I'm writing. It's just got a lot of kind of the feel is kind of a gothic country feel to a lot of the songs, but it seems to get my juices flowing no matter what I'm doing. I use it heavily during the Bigfoot story we've been talking about, but that was very much the feel I wanted with that. But yeah, I'm rambling. Sorry, Ben.
No, you're fine.
Well, that's a good thing, Tommy. When you guys do it, is it music that usually put on if you're writing or if you're drawing, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. I get a lot of ideas from music or just inspiration, like Tommy just mentioned. It just puts you in a certain mood, puts you in a certain place,
right,
mentally that you want to be in. What about you, Johnny?
Oh yeah, definitely. A lot of I go all over the place. So I mean, one day it may be a hard rock sort of deal, and I get going with that, or maybe some hip hop or something, and they maybe praise and worship. Who knows? And it just kind of gets you going, and you just go, you just go. I mean, classic R&B, classic rock. Sometimes I put on classical, and they put on a Mozart CD. So, yeah, I always kind of wonder what everybody what was on their playlist. I know Tommy is a big country fan. I know he's Taylor Swift.
Yep.
So
big Swiftie.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I just wonder how music plays upon part of your creative process when you're doing your do.
Yeah, I think.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Tommy.
Oh, I was going to say, for me, the music just puts me, kind of like Ben said, it puts me in a certain mood, a certain emotional place. Last night, I actually didn't use the Pandora station I was discussing. I used a different one. I had lots of Blue October, Linkin Park, stuff like that. And it had me kind of in that right mindset that I needed to burn through those pages. And I felt pretty good about them when I was finished. But,
yeah, I think part of it is just being in control of your environment,
Right.
for one, and then second, it is about the mood that it puts you in. The genre that you're working on also has a lot to do with it. The type of music you listen to.
Right.
yeah, I'm married with 3 kids, and my office that I'm in right now. That's my oldest son's computer behind me, and I have a PlayStation next to me, and I very rarely just outright force my sons out of my office when I'm writing. So I kind of need whatever I can to draw it in, to close my bubble in,
Is that a thing with you, Ben? Do you have to, get away from everybody? Does that help you, or does it matter?
Sometimes it does depend on what I'm working on. Like if it's an idea, a thought that I'm trying to chase Being in control of my environment definitely does help.
Right.
If I'm like in the drawing process or writing like something that's a little bit looser that I know I'm going to work over later on,
Right.
I don't have to be so in control of my environment. I can listen to a podcast. I can listen to other people talking sometimes.
Right.
It just depends on what I'm working on.
I will say when I'm lettering, I can get away with like watching something. I can focus well enough to pay attention to the page, but I don't have to have that same mindset shift that I have to have when I'm writing. So that's one thing I do. I won't say I like better about lettering, but makes lettering a little bit easier than writing is, if I don't have to shut everything out around me as much to letter as I do to write.
Very well. Well, guys, it's getting 3 minutes till.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
This was a good podcast. I thought, I thought it was going to be. Well, I thought just for myself, I thought I'm not going to be able to say anything, but I thought it was good. A lot of helpful information for everybody out there.
Yeah, I thought it was good. Tommy?
Next time I'll try to get a less squeaky chair.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, on that first video, I had my recording going in the background for like the first 20 minutes, I think, 30 minutes. I had to go.
Was that you?
Yeah, I had to go and plug it.
Okay. Because I heard water. I thought you was cooking something.
No, because we talked about that when we did our test run before we went live.
Yeah, and then I completely forgot.
Yeah. I picked up on it immediately when you came on. It's like, oh, I guess he decided it wasn't that bad.
So. Now, next week.
Is my sound better at this time, guys?
Oh, yeah, you sound good, man.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic. Everything good.
Yeah, I just want to say next week we are going to have a special guest on.
Okay.
I conferred with him today. He's going to be on, Rob Geronimo. He's published through Alternate Comics.
Okay.
Yeah. So he'll be on with us. So that'll be a fun little interview.
Cool. Okay. Hopefully I'll have a different camera stand and maybe I'll draw.
Yeah.
Sweet.
All right, guys. So let's continue.
Drawing on camera.
No, you have to do your stick figure drawing. Yeah. You owe Johnny some pages.
Long overdue.
Yeah. Anyone who's watching, we appreciate it. Guys, for me, I love hanging out with you guys, even if it's spread out across the countryside like this. So.
Yeah. Same here, man. Love you guys.
Love you too, man. Love all you guys. Bye, everybody.
All right. Thanks again for watching, everybody. We'll catch you next week.
Catch you next week.